Hi. Today we want to talk about working effectively with a younger boss. And this is
Yes.
something that so many of our students and
Oh,
followers will face.
absolutely. And I think it's something that can feel intimidating
Hmm.
or, new in learning how to navigate
It
these
and
relationships
it
and
is
these
new.
all
Yeah.
these different generations at
Yeah.
work,
Yeah.
right? Some of these people that you're working with could be the age of your children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And especially if you are returning to work or making a pivot, you may be going in at a level that's not as high as your relative
Yeah.
age.
Hmm.
So this is more common and it's something that can be intimidating,
Yes.
but we know we can put you at
Yes.
ease. We don't talk about
You
that
can
today.
do it. You
Hmm.
can do it. So we're going to talk to you about how to do
Hmm.
it. So number one is to just keep an open mind.
Hmm.
Simple, right?
So age is not a reflection of skill or expertise.
Right.
But I think those of us of a certain age grew up in very hierarchical
Absolutely.
arrangements. So the higher up you went,
Yep.
the more you knew.
Yes.
And this is borne out in research about the generations. So if we look at the traditionalists or the silent generation who are, nearing 80, but there are
Mhm.
still a lot of them in the workplace, and then the baby boomers who are
Right.
between, 60 to 78,
Yep.
they grew up in a place where you got on a rung of a ladder and you
And you
went up,
Yep.
and the older you were, the more you knew.
Mhm.
We grew up, that generation grew up very respectful of authority, deferring to
Absolutely.
authority.
Yeah.
So if you're coming from that mindset as
Yeah.
an older Gen Xer or a baby boomer, walking in and working for someone who's 38 when you're
Right.
48 could feel like a little bit of a culture shock.
Yes.
So have an open mind, approach it with some
Yeah.
humility, and with the question of what can I learn from this person?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's that awareness, right?
Yes.
That I
Uh-huh.
am bringing my old story, the
Mhm.
old way that things were when I was in the workplace
Right.
before. I'm bringing that baggage with
Right.
me.
Right.
And so is it serving you or not serving you? Okay. Number two, understand and appreciate the younger generation's history. I think
Mhm.
this is really interesting. When we just did this as
The
a
webinar.
webinar
Yep.
for an organization, it was really eye opening to really hear about what their experience
Mhm.
was, right?
Mhm.
What their history
Yep.
was.
So we just did, as Kelly mentioned, a workshop for hundreds of people at Samsung, and it was a range of ages from Gen Z,
Yep.
which would be people who are under 24, I think,
Right.
all the way up to baby boomer. There were no traditionalists. It's
Now,
a tech company. You're probably not going to
yeah,
find a lot of 80-year-olds there, but still, what's that? A 50-year range in age.
absolutely.
And
Yes.
so what we were talking about is what history influences a generation. So, for example, if we look at someone, let's say, I mean, you could feasibly be working for a millennial because
Right.
a millennial could be as young as maybe 35.
Yep.
And, a young whippersnapper who's moving quickly through an
Hmm.
organization could be your boss. So you think about the way a millennial grew up.
Hmm.
They grew up with technology in their hands, depending on if they're 35, they had Facebook,
Yep.
they had cell phones, they had smartphones.
Yes.
They grew up getting information very quickly.
Very quickly.
We grew up
Yes.
waiting to get things in the
Oh,
mail.
yes. Or
They
the
get,
phone to ring, or
yes,
get home from work and
yes.
listen to your answering machine.
Exactly.
Yes.
So everything to them comes quickly. So what we might perceive as impatience
Right.
is it's just that's their learned
There.
experience.
Yes.
Now the benefit of that is that we might tolerate waiting 2 weeks to get an answer on
Right.
email.
Right.
A millennial is not going to wait 2 weeks to get an answer on email. In fact, they're probably not going to use email.
Right.
They're going to either message you
Yeah.
or
Through the
Slack you.
organization's
Right.
message. Yep.
Exactly.
Messaging
So
system.
understanding what influenced them, just like we
Mhm.
mentioned earlier, like the older generation grew up at a time of great patriotism.
Yep.
There's great respect for authority. Young people coming through right now, I mean, look at our political divide.
Yes.
They don't have
Absolutely.
that same respect for authority. They don't just think because I said so is an
Right.
answer.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. And that hierarchy too. They
mhm.
don't necessarily believe
Nope.
in that.
Nope.
It's like they're doing work that feels good,
That's
that
right.
feels like it
That's
has
right.
purpose and meaning because they watch their generation of parents be a part of massive
Mhm.
layoffs and
Yep.
work really hard for
Yep.
30 years and then,
Mhm.
get shoved out the door.
And you bring
So,
up a good point. I mean, the ladder doesn't exist,
right.
right? That person that might have worked somewhere for 24 years and got canned probably isn't going to work there for 24 years anymore. We're moving a
Right.
lot more. So the fact that we're moving from a ladder
Yes.
to a lattice where people are intentionally moving
Yes.
laterally. So that's the other thing you'll see in the younger generations. They're less interested in titles.
Mhm.
They saw that titles may not have meant a whole lot to their parents
Right.
in the end. So they're interested in learning. So this is a generation that grew up learning, and it's sort of millennials down. They were learning in an individualized way. You're a teacher.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, right.
There was no such thing as I'm going to teach Johnny this way and Susie that
Right.
way.
Oh, no, no.
Right?
Well, when I was teaching, it was
Right.
that way,
I'm sorry.
yes,
Right.
yes.
But when we were
No.
kids,
Oh, no.
you were in the block and you did what
We
everybody
all
else
had the
did.
textbook,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and that's what you worked out of, and it didn't matter. You know,
Mhm.
maybe there were 3 levels.
Yeah, there
You only
was the
got
colors.
reading group.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
Yeah.
And it took you a while to figure it out.
Yes. Yeah.
But so these kids are growing up in the time of individualized learning,
Right.
learning stations in high school now. Like I had to go to high school. Now they have individualized schedules. They might not have to go to school in the morning.
Yep.
They might be able to leave. Maybe they're only going 3 days a week. So
That flexibility.
right, right.
You know?
They're growing up with that. So that's the way they lead and that's what they expect from the workplace.
Exactly.
Right.
And, you know, I think something to just spotlight here
Yeah.
is this is where our audience actually has similarity, this idea of the lattice
Mhm.
that, you know, the students that come to us are often looking for work that maybe isn't necessarily something where they're going to move up the ladder.
Yeah,
They want to
yeah,
try
yeah.
some things on. They
Yeah.
want to kind of figure
Yeah.
out, oh, well, maybe I want to get into that department because that's work that I think I want to
Yeah.
do. But then I want to explore and assess while I'm there, and then I might make a move that's more of a lateral
Yeah.
move. So I think this is where there's some
I
common
always say,
ground.
I actually say that one of the best things that ever happened to career relaunchers like us
Was that
is the Gen
generation.
Z and Y because
Yes.
they've made flexibility a
thing.
requirement. They
Yeah.
demand. So one of the things that we said to that Samsung audience the other day is that if you look at the things, all the studies that are done about what we all really want from work,
Right.
they're similar. The difference is the younger generations aren't afraid to ask
Ask
for
for
it.
it. Yes. Yes.
So we can
So
thank
that's
them.
something
Yeah,
we can.
that's
we
a
can
real
learn from them
plus.
too. So the next one is to don't assume anything.
And that's just good advice
Right.
in any
In general,
relationship.
yeah.
So I think we
That
walk
can get
in.
you into big trouble.
I mean, this happened to me actually at my fitness class the other day. I couldn't get something to work, and I have a bunch of middle-aged students. I have this one student who's a grad student, and I was like, "Oh, you know what, Nicole? Could you just come and fix this? I can't figure this out." And she's like, "I don't know how to do that." So don't assume that every young person is a digital native.
Right.
On the reverse, don't assume that every old person is a technophobe.
Right.
Right? Don't assume that the younger person doesn't want to be in the office and doesn't want to have in-person meetings.
Mhm.
And likewise, don't assume the opposite.
Mhm.
The best thing that you can do is to ask. So in
Absolutely.
any relationship, when you enter into it, a working, either a partnership or a manager, mentor
Mhm.
relationship, ask, how do you prefer to meet?
Absolutely.
How do you prefer to communicate?
Mhm.
How do you like to get feedback?
Yes.
Find out, because those are kind of the basic tenets of good working relationships. Understanding what motivates someone at work, how they like to communicate, how they like to get feedback.
Yeah.
Good for any relationship.
So that is a really good thing to establish with
Yes.
your boss.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate. That's
Yeah.
good, clear communication.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last one is to offer help and expertise. You
Mhm.
have a lot to offer,
Mhm.
and you need to be vocal about that.
Right.
And
So the
and it also needs to be nuanced too.
For
right?
sure. So
Yeah.
the first bullet was be humble. Go in there knowing and learn, seeing what you can learn from that person,
Right.
and assuming that you can learn something from anyone of any age. Because as we said at first, age does not equal skill and expertise. But similarly, because organizations are flatter, the manager employee relationship is different. So the
Right.
manager employee relationship that like our dads had, which was
Right.
you were told what to
Yes.
do and you did it.
Yeah.
The young person who's managing the older person now isn't expecting to manage that way.
Right.
So because the organizations are flatter, we are working in a much more distributed way. We're working in a flatter and more team-centered way.
Right.
So approaching the new manager with the assumption that we're going to work as a team,
Right.
and then asking them, what do you need from me
Right.
to help us meet our goals? How can I help you meet your personal managerial goals? Don't be shy about saying, this is what I do really well. Don't assume your manager knows that.
Mhm.
They've seen your resume, they may have interviewed you, they might know your general profile, but this is what I do really well. How can we dispatch me to make the most impact here? So just using those conversation starters of how can we work together
Right.
is a great way to make sure that you also are able to offer your expertise.
Right. Or when you're seeing a gap somewhere.
Yep.
and
Yep.
you know that you either lived through a time
Yep.
where you developed some kind of structure or process,
Right.
be
Right.
willing to
Right.
speak up and
Right. Right.
say, but doing it in a way that is, we are a team, we are
Yep.
working together,
Yep.
not I know this and you
Yeah.
don't know this.
Yes.
And you're not gonna,
Yeah.
it's really in the nuances of, we are a team, we are here
Mhm.
to support each other, and that is really
And we're not
what a younger
competing.
boss is looking for.
Exactly, for sure.
Yep.
So having a younger boss is an opportunity to learn new skills and
Yes.
develop important relationships. And the
Yes.
key here is that those relationships are likely to be more relevant
Mhm.
if your manager, let's say you're 48 and your manager's 38, that relationship is likely to be more relevant and have more impact on your team than if you're 48 and your boss is 68, because that 38-year-old is going to be there longer. They're going to be in the
Yes.
workplace longer. So
Yes, great
really
point.
looking from a selfish perspective of, I want to make the most of this relationship because it's
Absolutely.
going to be a long lasting one.
Yes. So there you have it. If you like what you heard today, you can like and subscribe. If you want to learn more about us and our programming, you can visit us at www.preparetolaunchu, the letter U.com. Thanks.